All right. Good evening, everybody. Hope everyone is had a great weekend and is ready for a little bit. Well, this is more fun. Let's be honest. This is a good night to be leading. This is my reward for having to do security models is that I get to do this class. So we will get going here. Uh, Reminder again, online, make sure you just keep it relevant to the class. We're not going to be doing, we don't want to have to mute people or, doing any sort of banning. So just keep it focused on what we're talking about. Real quick scheduling update. I didn't have this in the slides, so we'll make sure this goes out. Memorial Day is a day off. We're not going to teach that day. So everything just got pushed back one day. And then we also realized on the website we were missing that last class for that prep and practice testing. So what'll be nice on those is we're going to just literally go through and do practice tests. And what's great is this will be working on what does it look like? How do we go through what's our thought process on eliminating these things and kind of working through it. So hopefully that'll be helpful for you guys. All right. Well, so I'll be honest, I did the slides Friday, and then it rained like 2.5, 3 inches all weekend. So I had to make a change. Um, so yeah, we're rainy weekend. Hopefully it helped people study. This is 99 slides tonight, so we should be able to get through this pretty quickly. And if so, we can probably try and do some extra practice there tonight. We'll see how people are and what it looks like. All right, first quiz. What technique would lower the false accept rate and raise the false reject rate in a fingerprint scanner? So remember, false accept means they are getting accepted and shouldn't, and false reject means they are getting rejected but should be accepted. So for that, we want to increase the amount of minutia that's verified. Reason being, the more data points, the more opportunity there is for a rejection or a failed match to kick in. All right. User attempts to view data that they do not have a business requirement to view and are blocked. Example of what? Least privilege, need to know, rotation of duties, or separation of duties. Well, that's a tough one, but went with least privilege on that one. Reason being, we are going to limit to only what they need to do, or the least amount of privileges, right? We're going to stop only what should be accessed. All right. Server A trusts server B. Server B trusts server C. Server A therefore trusts server C. What term describes this trust relationship? Well, domain trust, there are multiple domain trusts in place. Forest trust, no. Non-transitive, well, non-transitive means it's not going across. So therefore we know it's got to be a transitive trust, right? Our trust is going to transition across domains. That's kind of the way I always thought of this. All right. Let me just double check, make sure the audio is sounding good here. All right, good, no notes. What protocol provides a common open protocol for interfacing and querying directory services information provided by network operating systems using port 636 and 3269 via TCP? So this is where we're talking about, you've got to do a lot of that memorization around some of these well-known ports. I just know when I see 636 and 3269, it's actually secure LDAP, but LDAP would be the correct answer there. So you just got to, this is why we keep really hammering on needing to know those memorization, right? Those things that we were talking about up until now. All right. Within Kerberos, which part is a single point of failure? Ticket granting ticket. Well, no, that's a piece of it, but it's not really a point of failure. The realm, that's the whole thing. Key distribution center, yeah, maybe. Or client server session key. Well, you can always have it, create a new session key. That key distribution center is the single point. That's what's going to handle all your keys. So again, this is just understanding, knowing how these different systems work, and just memorizing it. And the more familiar you are with it, and again, I think for me, just doing the test was the best way for me, practice tests, to learn it, make sure I've got it. But there's going to be certain things that are going to be just instant, like, oh, I know what that is, right? And the more of those you can get, it's going to give you more time, a lot less stress working towards those ones that maybe aren't quite as easy for you. All right, question 6. A type 2 biometric is known as what? Here's another one. Remember what Evan said, type 2 is FAR, right? 1 or 2, it's the FAR one. Boom, FAR. There you go. So before we really start going into this, I was told I have to give a dad joke tonight. So trying to decide which one I want to give. I gave the moderator team multiple options, and I think the one I'm going to go with, and maybe we'll break out a couple later here, but what I'm going to go with is, when does a dad joke, or when does a joke turn into a dad joke? When it becomes apparent. I need a rim shot. It's tough to tell a dad joke without having a bunch of people groan and grimace and laugh. So hopefully that went over well. All right. So tonight, domain 6, security assessment and testing. This is going to be fun. All right. What we're going to be looking at, designing, performing, analyzing security testing. Just 2 objectives: assessing access control and software testing methods. So this is pretty good stuff. I think we'll be able to get through this pretty quickly. So terms you're going to need to know: dynamic testing, that is testing while the code is executing, right? So dynamic means code is running, we're testing it as it's running. Fuzzing, we're going to just put in random malformed data into the software and see what happens. So think of this fuzzing being typically like within a web application, and we're going to go through all this more, but within a web application where there's a field, we'll just put in random data, see what happens. Penetration testing, that's an authorized attempt to break into an organization's physical or electronic perimeter, or both. So we're just testing, can we get into the building or the facility physically, a physical pen test, or through their through their external interface, external IPs, or do we get to do an internal one that says, all right, you're in, what can you do? All right, static testing. Well, it's exactly what it is. It's testing that code passively. Code's not running, so it's going to run through the code looking at it, but it's not going to be while the code is executing. So it's not going to see what actually happens. It's just looking for, typically more coding errors, things like that. And then synthetic transactions, or synthetic monitoring, building scripts or tools that simulate the normal activity. So you would do this you want to test your code, your application. Rather than having to manually go through that, you would create a script or create a tool that would allow it to process much faster, a lot less overhead from a human standpoint. All right, so the assessment and testing are critical. We're looking at assessing the real world security, right? So if you are really getting attacked or really having something happen, let's test that. So we want to know what's going on. And if you don't, how do you know where to start unless you've assessed where you are? It's pretty tough to put together a plan of action if you have no idea what your plan of action should include. So we'll talk through some overall security assessments, some of the different testing methods and controls, and then how we test software between static and dynamic. All right, first things first, it is critical to determine scope, right? We need to know what we're testing and why are we testing it. We don't want to just say, hey, we're going to test this. We want to know what this is. With narrower scope, like it says, you can have penetration testing, vulnerability assessments, security audits. The PCI could be something where you're assessing a specific smaller scope. And even within those bigger, larger scope assessments, you will typically see that narrower scope in place. All right, so penetration testing, lots of different types here. Again, the what, the why, and some how. So we could be doing network or internet external penetration testing, the internal network, or a DMZ. Can we get from the external into the internal? So kind of the difference there. External, could I get into your external systems? Are there any vulnerabilities? Could I get any data off of your web servers or your application servers that are publicly published? Internal, if somebody were to get in, what do you have in place to mitigate that damage? What could they get to if you were being breached or attacked from a hacker? The DMZ, right? You're going to have that separated out. Well, if I get into your DMZ, could I get into your internal network? We'll talk about war dialing, some wireless pin testing. War dialing, there's a whole slide. Well, we'll go through that. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. Wireless pin testing, and then physical. Can we get into either a facility or a specific room? Typically, data center or a records room, somewhere there's going to be sensitive information. And then really what's the point? We want to simulate the different types of attacks, right? So either a client side, we're attacking your client workstations, those server attacks, what does your server vulnerability look like, and then your web application. And there is reasons for all that. Typically what we see is, the end target is your servers. That's usually where your sensitive data resides. The easiest way to get there is through those client-side attacks. So these all do play together. All right. So we've got black hat and white hat. I know there's been some mention recently around blacklisting, whitelisting, and changing that. I don't know if that'll happen here, but for the purposes of the exam right now, this is the way you will want to remember this and memorize it. So black hat is malicious, or sometimes you'll hear crackers. So the whole point was black was the villains in fiction, right? Darth Vader wore all black. The bad guys in the cowboy movies, the old westerns wore all black. So that's where that comes from. They lack ethics. And at the end of the day, they don't have to follow the law, right? If they're overseas hacking into a company here in the U.S., odds are really high they'll never get caught here. So they don't have to follow the law. It's kind of what makes it a little bit more difficult to be on the defensive side. We do have to follow the rules and follow the law. All right. White hat hackers are the good guys. So that's your professional pen testers, where we are hired to test this, right? You want the good guys to tell you, hey, your back door doesn't lock before the bad guys find it and are in your house, right? You'll see malware researchers. So they're researching that malicious code and then giving that to those vulnerabilities to vendors. And then ethical hackers, so code of ethics and obey the laws. Then you have gray hat hackers, and these sort of fall in between. So they will, the way you look at this is typically they start as a white hat, right? They're going to bring a weakness in a system or a product to the vendor or the company to bring it to their attention. Like I said, unlike the black hat, they're not acting with malicious intent, but what will happen is sometimes if they don't hear back or they don't feel it's an appropriate response, they will, release that before the company has a chance to actually patch it and follow kind of the ethical notification process. So they seem to want to follow the white hat, but don't always. They kind of go back and forth. Maybe there's a company they don't like, and they're not going to follow that process. So kind of a little bit of a head scratcher about that. All right. So war dialing, and I realize this is definitely a little bit older, but it will still be in there. And again, a lot of these things that you're seeing that are historical that maybe aren't technically relevant now are intended to help you understand the history. How did we get to where we're at now? So there is a reasoning behind it, right? We can't understand where we're at if we don't understand how we got here. So war dialing is using a modem. It'll put in a bunch of numbers and give it a range, and then it just simply runs through those looking for that modem carrier tone, right? Once you get access to that, then you can start doing some attacks. Again, not very common anymore, although the same concept was done and is being done now with Zoom. They had a Zoom dialer doing the exact same thing. It just would fire through those random Zoom meeting codes looking for non-password protected meetings. So the concept still is relevant today. So that's how we got here. Social engineering. So we're using the human mind to bypass security controls. Easiest way into an organization is through the receptionist or through the staff, not through a well-configured firewall. So you could use this in combination with other types. So the client-side attack, we're going to send maybe some phishing email, and then it will drop a beacon and allow us a foothold into the organization. Or it could be, launching that fake Office 365 login page and trying to harvest credentials. And then, so with that, a lot of the physical tests are the same way. Social engineering with the client side, like it says there, emailing malware with the subject of Cat 5 hurricane about to hit Florida. Right now we're seeing it obviously around coronavirus and COVID-19. There's been a huge uptick in the in malware and spam with that. And then, physical social engineering, using to tailgate an authorized user into a building. Here in Minnesota, show up with a big sheet cake with both hands, and just about anybody will let you in. So a lot of that social engineering, you need to know, what the target company is. There's a lot of research where the region is, those types of things to take, full advantage and get in. All right, that's War Games. So there you go, War Dialing. It's a good movie. All right, so this is an actual, there is the war dialer, right? So you can see what the number was that it was calling. Let's see, look at my laser. Right, so here's the current active one. What is it doing? You can see here you've got the area code, your start number, your end number, and then it saves an output and all the different configurations. See, in 1988. So they took this and made that Zoom dialer almost the same exact thing, just focused on searching the web for Zoom. So that's how that works. Kind of cool. All right. Within penetration testing, we have three different types. So black box or zero knowledge is blind. We want you to pen test FRSecure's external resources. And that's not authorization to do it for this class. This is an example, but that's all I'm going to tell you, right? I'm not going to say, other than obviously the URL or the name of the company, what their external resources might be, what their IPs are, any subdomains, any of that. It's literally, you tell me what you can find and what you were able to do. Very time intensive. It's going to be more costly typically, just because right now you're having to do a bunch of reconnaissance and try to make sure you get everything, all that. So full knowledge, crystal box or white box test is you're providing that information to the testers. So from an external perspective, you're going to say, here are the IP addresses I want tested, and here are all the domains or URLs that we have. Test these and tell me what you find. Typically, this, from an external perspective, I think it's going to be a better test because nothing gets missed. You don't want to make any assumptions. You don't want to pay a lot of money and and they don't get everything. Internally, it would be anything that the testers request. So this could be network diagrams, right? What are your procedures? What was the findings last time? And then the partial knowledge or gray box are in between, right? So maybe you get some knowledge. So I think a lot of times for our, externally we do the white box. Internally, it's more of a gray box, and that we'll know kind of what the scope is, maybe some ranges, some IPs, but not everything. It kind of the fun thing is, outside of a black box where it's like you don't know anything, everything else is it's kind of slides, right? So we might have some information, but how much depends. Anyway, most penetration tests, you have a scope. It's a limitation on time spent, right? Because reality is you could probably go for a long time and continue to get information, but at some point you got to cut it off. So either you're going to get more and more info, or you're stopped and you just keep testing and keep testing. And like, oh, I'm so close. I've almost got this. I just need whatever, and you keep going. So you put restrictions on the time and say, in the time allotted, this is what we were able to do. Here's some testing tools. Metasploit, Core Security has one. Immunity Canvas, Sec tools. There's custom tools. There's this Kali Linux, and there's actually a new one out there that we've started doing some testing with from an incident response called Flare VM. It looks really cool as another alternative. But yeah, Kali Linux, kind of the gold standard. It's a Linux package built for this. Comes with a lot of the pen testing tools preloaded. All right. So standard methodology. Planning, right? What are we going to do? What do we know? Reconnaissance, what can we find? When we do, when we're looking at reconnaissance, it's going to be maybe looking for things that could be used in a social engineering attack, right? What is out there on the internet about the company, about your target that you're working toward to pen test? We'll do it, then you do enumeration scanning. So, hey, let's do a port scan and enumeration scanning, kind of just getting a feel for the layout. What is out there? What are we working with? Once you do that enumeration scan, you do a vulnerability assessment. So now I'm going to put together my plan of attack, right? What did my enumeration scans find? What can I go with? Did it find any, unpatched software, known bugs with known exploits, those types of things. So once you put together that plan of attack, then you goes to exploitation. So now we're going to actually execute on any vulnerabilities that were identified in the scanning and vulnerability assessment phases, and then goes to reporting. So now we're going to have to write up the report. Black Hat really is very similar. There's really not a lot of difference from the overall methodology. Biggest difference is, as it says there, they're going to try and cover their tracks, right? So erasing logs or deleting whatever their payload was that got in, and then they will also do the backdoors or beacons or ransomware, right? So they're violating system integrity that a white hat hacker will do everything in their power to avoid doing. Pen test framework, so really good. Trusted Sec, Dave Kennedy. It is, if you're interested in pen testing, this is a great read. Very, very informative. All right. So you'll notice confidentiality, integrity, and then system integrity. So, and then the other thing is, it's not listed out here, is availability, right? We don't want to take down a system while we're doing a pen test. So got to make sure when you're doing this test, you don't know what you're going to come across, right? A lot of times what we'll do is say, what's your target goal? And they'll say, well, there's going to be a file call. They won't maybe tell us what it is, because that would be easy, but there'll be a file with a phrase in it. When you can answer, or, tell us the phrase in the report, or answer the question, provide the answer to the question in that in that file. That's how we know you were able to access that area. So the way you think of that is if we don't want to touch that sensitive information. I don't want, it's an added liability as a pen tester, right? I don't want to be able to copy credit card information. I don't want any of that stuff. I don't want to be opening files or things that may have that. Excuse me. So we'll put that dummy file out there, read or write to it, depending on the test, and then we want to make sure that we don't interfere with that integrity of the system, right? If I have messed with the integrity of your files, that's not good. All right, how are you going to serve your client? So very important to make sure that there's no loss of integrity. The other thing is, and we see this quite a bit, if we're doing a pen test and identify signs of either a previous or current attack in place, we will stop, pull back, alert you right away. Hey, timeout, we can't do this. Something else is happening. So, all right, so vulnerability scanning, vulnerability testing. So that's just going to be a scan, Nessus, OpenVAS, Qualys, Rapid7, and Expose. It's looking for missing patches, configuration errors, CVSS scoring. Don't believe you'll need to know exactly how that CVSS scoring works, just that 1 is the lowest, 10 is a critical, kind of on a 1 to 10 scale there. The big difference, vulnerability testing, the way that I think gets people to understand it the best is going to be kind of a home inspection, right? We want to scan and see what's going on. What are we dealing with? What works, what doesn't work, what locks work, what windows open, what don't. Pen testing is the actual trying to breaking and entering to get into the house. So vulnerability testing, we're going to scan, making sure trust but verify, trusting our patch system, vulnerability management system is working, but just testing it to make sure with another tool that we're not using for the actual patching. There is the CVSS is by NIST. I think now we're at CVSS 3. There are the other 2 calculators there listed there. It's interesting read. If you see any vulnerabilities, it'll explain how all that works, just how it came across to that level. Okay, on to security assessments. Maybe just double check, make sure I haven't seen anything. All right. So with this, we want to keep this holistic, right? We don't want to just focus. Pen testing is a narrow focus, right? PCI, narrow focus. A full security assessment is going to be looking at the entire organization, very broad scope. So, it may be more high level across. We're not going to truly deep dive in until we get across this whole thing, but then there's going to be parts of it where we do deep dive in. So around penetration testing or within the security audits like it lists down there. Across those multiple domains, do we have policy, procedure, and administrative controls? Do we have the documentation in place? And this is, again, across the organization. A lot of the time, especially with healthcare, where they sort of are forced to report their breaches, what you'll see is that they were doing an assessment on a narrow scope, maybe not holistically across the whole organization. So the area that had the medical information at PHI may have done a security assessment and been in great shape, but HR, finance, whatever, didn't. Well, attackers were able to get in and then pivot and move across. So we want to look at the organization as a whole. It could then be many of those other controls listed there. So looking at change management, doing a network architecture review, doing penetration tests, doing some scanning, and making sure you have auditing in place. All right, keywords: assessing the effectiveness. Oh, and I'm gonna get yelled at because I totally missed that last bullet point because we're not using that anymore. So you didn't see this, and I'll make sure that gets fixed before we send this out to everyone. Assessing the effectiveness. Where are the gaps, right? So the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities, and what are the applicable threats? So what you'll want to know is make sure you know that kind of third bullet point, right? Vulnerabilities and threats equals your likelihood and impact, which is your risk. That's how you determine risk. What are my vulnerabilities and threats to this system, to the organization? What's the likelihood of that happening? And then what's the impact if it does happen? Those four things coming together is how we determine risk. All right, going back, we're going to start seeing a lot of these things start to tie back in together now as we start getting further in and get closer to the end. Administrative controls, our policy procedure, training awareness, the what should we be doing, how should we be doing it, standards and guidelines we're doing this against, and how are we training our staff on what their roles and responsibilities are under this program. Then physical is the things we can touch, right? Your locks, your cameras, gates, bollards, all those types of things. And then the technical controls, which is what is the effectiveness of that technology that we have put into place to protect our assets. So again, that's our scale. This is just how we do it. Same as a credit scale, and I'm again going to get yelled at, so I'm going to move on. But it's an easy way to understand and visualize and internalize a risk score, right, to people that maybe aren't security experts. All right. Internal audit, this is going to be structured. We're going to say a structured audit is for your external audience, right? Are we validating compliance? So this would be typically maybe ISO certification requires an internal audit to ensure that you're following your ISO controls. So we have to provide this to an external external audience, your auditor, to validate your compliance. So internal audits need to be departments need to be separated, firewalled off. They can't be auditing things that they have control over. And then an unstructured audit is more internal focused, right? Hey, we want to know where we're at and making sure that we're doing what we need to be doing, and what can we do to improve that. So that's the big difference there for an internal audit. So a structured is for your external audience for validation of compliance. Again, the way I always remembered that is because the easiest one for me to think of is ISO. It's the most well-known. ISO certification requires an internal audit function. It has to be really well structured. It has to be laid out. It has to follow your audit plan and show all your working papers, all those types of things, versus an unstructured internal audit intended to focus on improving your security program. All right, third-party audits. Well, hopefully you're going to have experts, right? If you don't have an internal audit department, maybe you're not big enough, right? Or you don't have anybody with that skill set, you don't want to hire someone, you would bring in a credible third party. So, right, it's always easier. I think you add, like it says, add credibility. If you're grading your own homework, right? Or there's always a little bit of conflict of interest, right? Do you really know if they want to call out their coworkers? If you got to bring in a third party, you in theory should have a impartial person doing, or an impartial group doing your audit. And that could also be used to teach your internal audit department. Maybe you're growing it, or you have a new person. You're going to bring in a third party to help educate them on what should be done. All right. Log reviews, really important. So reviewing your security audit logs, making sure you have things in place, right? Is your access control working? Keep in mind, so in this, like it says, reviewing the audit logs is a detective control, right? We're doing it after the fact to see what's going on. So we know we can't stop everything from happening. So we have to be able to detect what we miss, what we don't stop. So not risk elimination, risk management. So with this, have we want to make sure we understand and have a set schedule, right? Doing those things. From a testing perspective, security audit logs is going to be your detective control. So you may get questions where it's a part of the annual or part of the regularly scheduled audit log review identified unauthorized access. What type of control is this? Well, it's going to be a detective control. All right, this is what you should be collecting. If you're not in your day-to-day jobs, I would recommend starting pretty quickly. It's surprising how often we get into an incident and there's none of this stuff or very little. It's the defaults. The 20 meg Windows domain controller security log doesn't, it may be a couple of minutes depending on the size of the organization. So make sure you follow this. This has a really good document there, that 892, that you can follow. All right, centralized logging. Really important. So what is this going to do? It's going to help you with your log retention. Right? So we're not keeping a ton of data maybe on those servers. We're sending that off to a central aggregator. That allows us to have that, like it says, that sufficient legal, regulatory compliance, whatever that might be. And then for an incident, right? We'll go a little bit off topic here, but right, the average time for identifying a breach is 3 to 6 months, somewhere in there, depending on who you ask. How do you know how far back you can go if you don't have some sort of a centralized logging? Also assists in log protection, so helping with your integrity and availability. What happens with, there's my dog going crazy. What happens with that is you want to have this separate from your what it's logging, right? So we want to have this in its own isolated, segmented network, protected, not having it with the same username and password you're using to manage on a daily basis. So in the event of an incident and the attacker goes in and deletes logs, well, that's fine. It's going to be really hard for them to also get into your central logging, your centralized logging solution. So this is going to be that same solution. So allowing for, as it says, log protection, aggregation, correlation, and some dashboard reporting. One of the nice things that maybe want to think about with SIEM is it's going to take all those different resources and automatically put them kind of in order, right? So we're not looking through 15 server logs, the firewall logs, a database log, right? It's all in one place, and you can easily correlate what happened in one place. It's really, really important. It's really helpful in the event of an incident. Unfortunately, it's not plug and play though. So initially there's going to be a lot of noise, and you got to understand and know what do we need, how long do we need to keep what things, and what's important and what's not. All right. On to testing methods. So static testing, we talked about a little bit. Passive test, right? Code is not actually running. So this is going to be the walkthrough of it, static code review, the way to think of it. Using app tools for that, or it could be manual, but that would probably be pretty painful. It's going to go through the code line by line, looking for syntax errors, things like that, known vulnerabilities, maybe using out-of-date libraries or something, and they would help catch some of that. All right, dynamic testing. It's testing the code while executing it. So the code will be running, and we're going to test it and see what it does while it's running. White box software testing. So when the tester will have source code, right? Well, they'll know everything about that application, how it works, what are the variables, how is the data structured on the back end, things like that. Black box, very similar to what we were talking about earlier. All you know is, hey, here's the software and go. Good luck. Traceability matrix, or the requirements traceability matrix, you can see it either way. Mapping that what is the customer's requirements to your testing plan? So we're going to say, hey, customer, what are the requirements? What are you trying to get out of this? And they have 5 or 6 things. So then we put together our test plan and make sure that our plan addresses whatever their requirements are. There you go. So a traceability matrix is making sure your test plan maps to customers' requirements for the test. Fuzzing or fuzz testing, black box, so we don't know exactly how that application, that software works. We're just going to throw random malformed data into the input and see what happens. Does it crash? Does it give me an unexpected response that I could use for other purposes moving forward with the test? And then combinatorial software testing, so black box, we're going to identify and test every unique combination of software inputs. We're just going to run through and say, what does it take? What kind of inputs does it take? So these are all really important things that you will need to know and memorize. And if you're not going to use it after this, then there you go. But all right, so there you go. Static testing, not running. It's analyzing the software without executing the program, really on that source code. So you can go there to that Wikipedia page, looking for some tools for static code analysis. You can do it. You should do it as part of probably a SDLC, but there's a couple of places that will do it for you as well. All right, so here's your traceability matrix. So here you can see, let's see, get my laser pointer here. So hey, here's our requirement. What is it? And then along here, here's our testing plan. How do these align, right? What's the priorities? In this case, it's coloring is representing row work item and then priority, and then some queries. But that's really what this looks like. I think it might help people to visualize that a little bit more. But yeah, we're just going to say, I know they have these, in this case, 13 requirements. How is my test going to satisfy that requirement, and what's the how are these linked together, and what's the priority? If it's a higher priority, we got to make sure it's done, things like that. All right, so synthetic transactions. Yeah, we're just going to script to simulate normal activity. Baseline performance metrics. I know we use this for performance testing, load balance or load testing on web servers. Right. I'm going to script what transactions would typically look like on this web application, this web server, and then I'm going to hit a box against it and get them baseline. Then now I know that this configuration can do X number of transactions per minute, whatever it might be. It's really a way to just understand what the performance, what that baseline should be. A way you'll see this with ramping up around Black Friday, right, for websites or things like that. Zoom had to do they had some baselines. They knew what they needed to do to start ramping up as the number of users went up. All right. Again, you will need to know these things on this page. So unit testing, it's low level. We're going to start at the lowest level. We're going to do some unit testing. So we could be testing just specific components, that function, procedure, objects, whatever it might be. But what we want with a unit is it's a piece of the software that we're testing. Okay. Installation, so exactly what it sounds like. We're going to test that software as it's installed and as it first comes up. What does that look like? Are there bugs? Are there vulnerabilities? What's going on with it? Does it work? Integration testing, so multiple components into a working system, right? So we could do making sure that those different software components that we tested in unit testing, right? So those units may work individually. Well, now we're going to combine multiple of those units into a working system, and what happens? Regression testing is after an update, a modification, or a patch, right? So we did testing, we had a baseline. Now we're going to say we made a change to it. What's happened? Do we introduce anything performance-wise or vulnerability-wise, whatever it might be? We're going to do some regression testing, making sure that it's still functional. And then acceptance testing is making sure that the software meets the customer's operational requirements. Okay, so the user, you've applied a patch or applied an update to a piece of software. The user goes in and does testing, and this is that user, user acceptance testing in that case. But you want to go and make sure that all the functionality that was there, all the requirements that were there prior to that update are still there. All right. Fuzzing. So entering random malformed data, right? So this is going to be that boundary check, buffer overflows, right? Can we break the software by just throwing random stuff at it? This is going to be automated variable inputs, the command line, environment variables, program attack inputs. So things like knowing what the software was written in and knowing kind of what those environment variables or things like that would be. Just throwing random stuff in there and seeing what happens. There you go, sektools.org for the fuzzers, and then Burp Suite is kind of probably the more well-known automated tool, commercial though. There you go. That is what Burp Suite looks like. I guess they do have that community edition, but if you're using it in a job, you need to pay for it. All right. Some other testing terms you'll need to know. Misuse case. So what happens if we execute a malicious act, right? So we want to know a use case, right? Anything that happens, what happens. Misuse is if somebody intentionally does something, what's going to happen? So we want to test intentionally, basically like we're going to fuzz our own machines, right? We're our own software. I want to know what happens to our software when it's misused. Test coverage analysis, looking at interface testing, and then that combinatorial. So what are we testing? Are we testing all the interfaces exposed? And then are we doing a combination? So we're going to identify and test all unique combinations of software inputs. So between those two, that's kind of it. If you're not going to be doing web application pen testing, things like that, probably not going to use this outside of it, but you'll need to know kind of at a high level what that is, what these terms mean. Again, I think from the exam standpoint, this is all the further you need to go, but there we go. Done. All right. No. All right. We're going to start on 7, security operations. So security assessment and testing, super fast. That's a really short, small piece, but really important. And again, highly testable. All right. So now we're going to start on security operations. So the foundational concepts, your incident investigations, incident management, disaster recovery. All right. A lot. So what are we looking at here? Administrative security, forensics, incident response management, operational, preventative, and detective controls, and then asset management. And there are more, but that is what we're going to get to on tonight. There is the rest of them. So continuity of operations, BCP. We'll go through all these in a lot more detail. All right. Business terms. Again, memorization. Know the difference. So business continuity plan, long-term plan to ensure continuity of business operations. So that is your overarching plan. The continuity of operations, disaster recovery plan, incident response plan, all those are subsets of the business continuity plan. And we'll go through all this more. Collusion, it's where two or more people are subverting the security of a system. So it may be, financial. Two people have to sign off on transactions. Well, if I want to steal money or embezzle money, I now need to get somebody else to work with me on that. Continuity of operations. Well, how are we going to continue operating during the disaster? The disaster is being any disruptive event. And then disaster recovery plan is more of a technical plan of how are we going to recover from any disruptive event. All right, we will need to know all these things and how they go together, and we're going to talk through those. But meantime between failures, so how long will the system run before it fails? Now, this is an average, and we'll go through kind of some of the methodology around that, but really important to know that. Meantime to repair, how long to recover? Mirroring, so we'll go through this, but part of a RAID, redundant array of inexpensive disks there. And then striping is another form of RAID. We're going to go through all of these in a lot more detail, but you will need to know what those mean. All right, administrative security. So how are we going to control operational access to data? Right. So from this, when you're looking at it, you've got the first one there, least privilege or minimum necessary access. Only the access then is required for the performance of their duties, period. If I don't need access to that data, that software, that whatever to perform my duties, I don't have access to it. You might see it as minimum necessary access. I don't remember seeing that on the exam. It was more least privilege, but discretionary access control is where it's most applicable. Need to know is mandatory access controls. So determination based on clearance of the subjects and classifications of the objects. Boy, I'm sure everybody's like having a little bit of PTSD on going back to discretionary and mandatory, and we'll see what we can do to not have too many bad thoughts here. So this is an extension of least privilege, right? So it's the way we are going to enforce need to know only beyond just that clearance, right? So I don't need just a clearance to have access. It's that clearance and the classification together. Separation of duties. So we want to have multiple people for critical or sensitive transactions. You want to make sure the whole point of separation of duties that one person can't, access, or so the way I think of it, I can't request access, approve access, grant access to something, right? Somebody else has to request it, somebody else has to, or I can request it, somebody else has to approve it, and then somebody else should be the one actually granting that access. So we don't want one person in charge of that whole control chain. Collusion, like I mentioned, is two parties conspiring to undermine the security of the transaction. All right. Exam warning on this. You want to make sure you understand it, and we'll go through it here. But so rotation of duties, job rotation is making sure that you don't have one person with too much, and then also that one person isn't the only one who knows it, right? That's that hit by the bus or won the lottery. We want to make sure that multiple people maybe have the ability to perform that action. And it rotates it around. So this could be, you're doing this job for 2 weeks and somebody else does it for 2 weeks, and then third person does it for 2 weeks. Kind of rotates through who does the actual job. So with that, it's an important control, but it's cost, right? How many people, how many organizations can afford to have multiple people doing this and being able to do it? A lot of times it's just not reality. So make sure you look at that cost as consideration. You never want to spend more on the cure than what the solution than what the risk is presenting. So if you have the rotation of duties is going to cost you, $50,000 a year for salary and everything, and the risk is that maybe they can steal, $15,000, and you've done your whole likelihood impact and all that stuff. Likelihood of this happening is, pretty minimal. Well, it's not a good use of your funds to put a rotation of duties in place if that's going to cost you more than what that risk actually presents to the organization. Being said, when you do it, make sure you document your decision making. Mandatory leave, forced vacation. A lot of times you'll see this in banking and finance. So you have to take at least 5 consecutive vacation days or 10 consecutive vacation days once a year. I know in my background, we were looking at a small community bank, not prior to my career here, and they had one person that did everything, and they said, "Oh, hey, we're trying to do this one piece, and it's not working." And she volunteered to come in from her forced vacation. Turns out it was fraudulent or suspicious behavior happening, right? So without that required time, you might not have seen that happen. So it's really trying to force and make sure that that person is gone for a specific amount of time to uncover any sort of suspicious or fraudulent behavior. NDAs. So as it says, Directive, you're really just making sure that before you have access to sensitive information or data or systems, whatever it is, you understand your legal responsibility to maintain the confidentiality of that sensitive information. Directive control. So it's just really, to make sure that they understand, again, hey, what am I supposed to be doing? What are my responsibilities for protecting any information that I find? All right, background checks. I gotta say, pretty impressive. We made it to session 9 before my dogs started going crazy. I figured that would be like immediately in the first class. All right, background checks. Investigations, pre-employment screening. A lot of times this is done maybe with credit or criminal background checks. What this should be done is the level of the check should be appropriate for the roles and responsibilities and level of access the person will have access, or the level of information the person will have access to. You really should be doing ongoing or post-employment, whether they continue to have that trust. So a lot of times with that ongoing one, it would be more the credit checks for financial, people in finance. Are they suddenly now in financial trouble where they would be at a greater risk for potentially embezzlement or for blackmail given their position? So important, last one from the test or for the exam, read the scenario, right? So here are background checks ahead of employment, preventative, right? We're going to prevent the risk, right? Somebody maybe had been arrested for embezzlement or theft. Well, we want to prevent that from coming in. Well, the ongoing is a detective, and you could argue deterrent. They would give you some clues on there to understand that, but it's more of a detective control. What's changed. But it could be a deterrent if you know you're going to get a credit check every 6 months or every year. You're probably less likely to do things, or a criminal criminal check, like for a driver, right? Do I have any DUIs or tickets? Well, if I know that could potentially cost me my job, I might not do those things. All right, privilege monitoring. As you add privileges, right? So now we're going to get to additional control, like around this. We need to look and monitor and review what's happening. So as you can see there, anybody who can do account creation or modification deletion, those system reboots, data backup, data restore, source code access. If you have the ability to do any of those things, now this could be either a person or an application, right? But we want to add additional review, additional monitoring around what actions are being taken. All right, digital forensics. This is how we are going to deal with investigations. So typically this is more legal, that you'll see a lot of this. What happened? That's what we're looking for. So forensics, so look at that kind of sub-bullet there. Between forensics and incident response, forensics evidence centric, right? So we think this happened, or this employee was doing something or we think this person was doing something they shouldn't have. Can you do a forensic investigation and understand what they did? Incident response is going to be more active, right? Identify, contain, recover from your incident. Now, yeah, obviously you're going to collect a lot of evidence in an incident response, but it's not associated with a crime. So I think when you're looking at this from an exam perspective, digital forensics is going to be more crime focused, right? So preserving the crime scene. You don't want to violate any of the data or data environment. So when you're looking through the exam and you see a big long question and then it's like you see digital forensics or incident response, we'll look for, is it a crime scene, or is it looking for kind of those keywords of identify, contain, or recover? That's your big difference there. All right. So with this, we want to make sure we don't unintentionally modify the system. So with this, you typically will take a forensic copy, right? So you got, it says down there, binary bit stream image, exact replica of the original data. Don't do forensics on the live evidence. That's just not the right thing. Anti-forensics is exactly that. It's what can we do to prevent forensics from happening. So memory resident, we see quite a bit of that, where it kind of that fileless malware or only runs in memory. That's why we say don't turn off your machine if you think it's infected. Remove the network cable. So if you pull power, we lose what's happening. We've lost evidence. Yeah, so binary images, normal backup. So that's important. I can't think of the word. It's been a really long day. A differentiator, there we go, between a backup and a digital forensic copy. Backups is typically going to capture what's active, right? And only what that data that's marked allocated. A forensic copy copies everything that's on that disk gets copied over. So that's a big difference there. All right, 4 types of data. You will need to know the difference in these 4 types. So allocated, it's parts of that disk that have active data, right? This is what's been written to. Unallocated is no active data. Now, important to know, this could be either it's because it's never been allocated before, or it's been marked unallocated. So if a file is deleted there, like it says, that data doesn't actually go away until it's overwritten. Right? It's just marked as unallocated and available for use. So backup may not catch that, whereas a forensic copy will copy that unallocated space and allow you to see what had been deleted. Slack space, so it's the specific chunk as a cluster. You have a minimum size that can be allocated by a file system, whatever that size is. Well, let's just say, I'm going to keep it super simple. Let's just say your Slack space is 1024, one megabyte. If you have a file that is 2.5 megabytes, well, that chunk is still going to be, the whole chunk is going to be 3 megabytes, but that half a megabyte that's not part of that file, that's your Slack space, right? It could be, it could have old data in it, but a lot of times it will be used by attackers to hide that information. So it'll create a file that is not the full size of your cluster, and then hide it within that. All right, the bad blocks, clusters, or sectors. So more with the platters, right? Not SSDs as much. You do see it, but typically, uh, well, yeah, I guess it does work with SSDs. But typically with this, we think with a hard drive, right? You run it and it identifies bad blocks. Um, Whatever that physical defect is. With the old platters, it would be maybe it got jostled, or it was being written and somebody bumped it. It'll scratch, cause it. Those will be marked as bad. Um, with that, when they're marked bad, operating systems ignore them, right? They're cordoned off. They're don't go there. Detour, you can't use it, right? So what will happen is attackers could mark sectors as bad, right? Because then the operating system isn't going to touch those, and then hide data within it. So they know that data won't get overwritten. All right. So a lot of different tools. You've got Ghost with that. FTK is a really good one. You can do some free testing with that. InCase is another really good one. So, read through those, look at them. You always want to have a write blocker in place just from a best practices, so you can show, hey, there's no way I modified it. There was a write blocker between the original evidence and where I was copying it to and the machine I was using. So with this forensics, you want to know those four phases. We want to identify what our potential evidence is. What am I going to be trying to collect? And then acquiring that evidence, whatever that means may be. And now analyzing that evidence. Again, we're going to analyze the copy of it, see what we can find, and then produce a report. With this, you want to do a hashing algorithm. So I would hash the original, do the copy, and hash the copy. That will show that we've got an exact copy, right? I didn't make any changes. This was exactly an exact copy of the original. And again, whenever possible, you should not be using original media for analysis. If you are, make sure you hash it before you do anything, and yeah, just try not to do it. All right, live forensics. So when you do this, we want to gather that volatile data. So traditionally, right, it would be powered off. You'd send the laptop off, and they'd bring it up and analyze what was on there. Well, unfortunately, now we're seeing those non-persistent tools. They're not writing anything. They're only residing in memory. They're running, and if you turn it off, it goes away. So we need to grab the evidence from a live system while it's actually occurring without any sort of a system interrupt. So Metasploit, open source exploitation framework. So really cool. Yeah, I don't know if you need to know specifically Metasploit for the exam. It keeps it pretty high level, but it's a really good tool to play around with if this is something you're looking at. Use it in a lab environment, right? You don't want to accidentally get a knock from the FBI because you were testing Metasploit and hit somebody's systems. So what you do, that payload is that so it'll do the scan, identify the exploits available. Once it exploits a system, it delivers that payload, whatever that might be, malware or ransomware, whatever it is. Metinterpreter is one of the more powerful payloads. So if your system is accessed, it will grab the password hashes and dump them. Once you get those hashes, then it's just a matter of time. How long do they want to run that password cracker? How strong are your passwords? The PSExec, if you're not familiar with sysinternals tool, which is by Microsoft now, PSExec is a fantastic tool for an admin, and also kind of like the whole PowerShell and sysinternals. They're great tools if you're an admin. It's also your worst nightmare because, gosh, now the attackers have everything they need to manage these things and take advantage of some of these exploits. Here's some information on PSExec and the pass the hash technique. All right, so dumping password hashes, it'll also do all those things. So these are the payloads that you could do. So you've exploited the system with Metasploit, you're utilizing MetaInterpreter, where you've dumped our password hashes. I'm now going to execute remote execution. I'm going to upload or download the files. I can do screen captures, keystroke logging. Right, so now I'm potentially capturing credentials. Disabling the firewall and antivirus. That's not ideal. And then looking at the registry. So those do get updated quite often. It's a really cool tool if you're interested in that. There you go. That is what that looks like, where you now have on here, we've exploited it. My administrator account this is their password hash. Guest account, this is theirs. User account, this is theirs. So it would dump all of those hashes, and now you can just run those through your password cracker at your leisure. You can also dump the registry. It really was intended to avoid detection, right? I mean, as a pen test, that's what you want. You don't want to be detected. Fortunately, it also means that the bad guys can use it as well. The other thing that's a little scary there, you could do basically almost all those functions on a previous slide without actually creating anything. You're not writing anything to disk. You've exploited it and now running this in memory. So you can run your password crack or password hash dump or keystroke logger completely in memory. If they suspect something and turn it off, it's gone away. Nothing to see. And there's no evidence of that happening. So here's an example of what that looks like. I'm going to grab these different registry keys, HKey local machine, software, Windows, current version, and now I'm going to run. Let me see, hang on, where's my laser pointer? So I'm going to set this value to run my backdoor. I'm copying this executable, listening on the port, and running it, and now it's going to execute my backdoor. So that's how you're going to set persistence. It's kind of fun, not testable in terms of the actual exploits here, but kind of cool to look at. So in this case, right, because it runs only in memory, if you power it down, there's nothing to see. It's gone. I've lost all that, most likely lost all the evidence that would have resided on that of the exploit that happened. All right, network forensics. So we've talked about digital forensics there. That's the systems. Network forensics is the data on the network in motion as it's moving. Same thing here. Forensics, it's gathering and preserving for presentation in court. So this could be things like it says there, your email, your online conversations, so Teams or Skype or Slack or whatever you're using. What web activities you're performing, and then file transfers. So as things are in motion, I need to capture those. That forensic software analysis, so that's fun. With that, you are going to see what malware does. So you want to use a virtual machine that has no network connectivity. Usually that's the most common way, is to run that. Like I said, I know you can do some of that in Kali, but Flare VM as well is really good at that. But basically, you run the malware and see what it does. When you do that, you can now put things in place to watch for it and better have protections against it. You could do reverse engineering. where you look at the actual code and reverse it back to see what it's doing. A lot of times they'll use multiple means of obfuscation to prevent that from happening. It's fun though. It's putting together a puzzle that you don't know what it looks like and what the end result's going to be, how many pieces there are, anything. Embedded device forensics. This is specific to IoT or the handheld, so like the RF scanners or barcode scanners, things like that. It does require specialized tools. So that's all you will need to know on that. All right, e-discovery. You will need to know this, electronic discovery. This is when your legal counsel or lawyers get electronic information during pre-trial discovery phase. So what will happen is you will get a subpoena. Hey, you need to hold all information around whatever their scope is, and you now need to make sure you can protect that and present it as appropriate on the advice of your legal counsel. So it's looking for electronically stored information. One thing that's important, it doesn't need to be conveniently accessible or transferable. So if you have, we got to have a data retention policy. I'm going to go kind of tie all this back together. The reason being, I need to know what my legal and regulatory reasons are and what are my business reasons, because if I come back and say, I don't have the data from 5 years ago, but I have no data retention policy that says I only keep that data for 3 years, well, it's going to be a lot harder to defend. So make sure you have a data retention policy that takes legal and regulatory requirements into place, right? So for banking, it might be 7 years from account closing, or healthcare, right? It's 10 years, I don't remember the exact amount, but it could be, just an example, 10 years from treatment. I got to keep that information for 10 years. If I don't do that and I can't show that I'm doing it, I'm going to be in trouble. Now, the nice thing is, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't need to be conveniently accessible or transferable. You just have to be able to provide it. So it could be on backup tapes and an offsite storage, and hey, I can get you that, but here's what it's going to take. You just have to be able to do it. All right, incident response management. Reality is you're not going to stop all incidents, right? It's just a matter of time. So what the best thing to do is to get ahead of it, right? So we want to have a, like it says, regimented, tested methodology. I want to know, how am I going to identify and respond to incidents before they occur? That's really what we're doing here. We know it's going to happen. How do I identify that, and how do I respond? The CSIRT Computer Security Incident Response Team, you want to know that. That's the group monitoring, identifying, and responding to incidents. So that might be a dedicated team. It could be people that have other roles, but that's part of their job description. What's important is understanding what that term means. So the overall goal, incident response, we want to minimize the cost and the damage with an incident. So how can we identify these faster, respond faster, contain faster, so that we can get back up faster, right? We want to minimize that disruption. All right, all kinds of different methodologies phrases and terms around incident response. I'm sure you've heard other ones than that you're going to see. And we're going to mirror what the exam will be asking you. So for the exam, memorize what you see here. Okay, so step 0, before we do anything, we have to prepare. So we know incidents are inevitable. Have we defined what's an event versus what's an incident? And then have we defined who's going to do what, how are they going to do it, when are they going to do it? What are the triggers for those different things? Okay, so once we've prepared that and gone through it, we're going to go to detection, right? I can't prevent it, I've got to detect it. So we're going to look at events in order to determine whether those might comprise a security incident. So we're going to have lots of events, This could be failed login attempts, right? That would be an event. Well, I just changed my password and I locked myself out. No, that's not really an incident. Or I've got 5,000 failed login attempts in a 3-minute window. Well, that's probably more, needs to be investigated more and could potentially be an incident. Detection, a lot of detective controls. So logging, alerting, monitoring, things like that. All right, then we get to containment. So I've identified and detected an incident. What are we going to do? With this, you're going to call your incident response team, and we're going to try and stop the spread, right? I want to keep this as contained as possible. How quickly can I stop this and get this off of the network? This could be, like it says, isolating traffic, powering off a system. It really depends on what the incident is. A lot of times in an incident, we'll do a quarantine using some of the tools we have where it can't communicate outside of our agent, so we can keep it live, grab evidence, but it's now contained, right? Whatever that malicious software is or whatever is going on that system can no longer spread. This is important with containment, where that binary backup is made. So make sure you understand that if it says what stage is the binary backup made, what's in containment. All right, so eradication. Now we've got contain. We know it's not spreading anymore. We've got control of the situation. Now we got to get this figured out what exactly is going on so we can get these systems clean, get it back up in that next phase. So what was the cause? How do we fix it? And what's that going to look like? So we have to know what caused that incident before we can begin recovery, before we can bring it back up, because if we don't know the cause, how do we know it's not going to just happen again? Right? So root cause analysis is key in eradication. You will have to know that. It is testable. All right, then we get to recovery. So that's going to be bringing things back up to their operational status. So what will happen here is once you go and get that root cause, you've identified, you've got everything under control. Now we're going to bring things back up. This is usually where IT maybe is going to restore a server from a backup. And then the business unit for that system will do testing, make sure everything's good, that everything is functional, and then they can bring it back online. Anytime you've had an incident, you're going to need to do additional monitoring of any affected systems for an extended period of time, just to make sure, right? You think you've got it all, but you know you've had an incident. Enhance your monitoring after an incident. All right, reporting. Yeah, so with this, most likely to be neglected and immature because, quite frankly, it's not fun compared to the rest, right? We're going to now write down everything that happened and do all this. It takes a lot of time, but it is really, really critical. Good reporting can really make a positive impact, right? If we can write down, here was the root cause, here's how this happened, here's how we prevent it in the future, here's the other things that we found to be deficient as part of this. Well, now you've got management's attention after you've had an incident. So now you really have an opportunity to get some good things put into place. The NIST 861R2 is your incident handling guide. You can see they've got their 4-step life cycle. Really, if you're looking at incident response, really, really good read. Really informative there. All right, so with this, the exam has that 7-step. The book has 8 with preparation. Make sure you know the order. So you've got detection or identification, response or containment. You need to know that the way those two map. Mitigation or eradication, reporting, recovery, remediation, and then lessons learned. It used to be the postmortem, but now it is lessons learned. So make sure you understand the order of these steps. All right. So now we're going to go into a little bit more detail with these. Preparation is going to be everything you do to prepare for it, right? So this is going to be any of your training, your incident response plan, policies, your procedures, your tabletop exercises. What do you have to better inform the people that are watching for how they can classify and determine impact? So what is an incident or an event? What elevates that to an incident? And then what's the level of that incident? Is it, yeah, it's pretty low to, oh dear. So making sure you have all those things in place, having all the tools in place as well, right? Do we have the media? Do we have tools for responding to incidents as they come in? Oh, Evan got me on that one. Note to Brad, show something. I don't know what I was supposed to show. Okay. Detection or identification. So what are the inputs into the incident response process? What are we doing? What are we monitoring? How do we determine, what the process is for, okay, I've detected this event to, I've determined that this event is an incident. The response or the containment. So with that, we need to have that classification and severity levels. We need to know, based on what the classification is and what the severity level is, what step by step, what are our processes. If you have never been through an incident, it's chaotic, right? In that chaos, those things go right out the window, and now you're struggling. We're going, oh, good Lord. So you want to have step by step. If this, then do this, then do this. Here's when you alert the incident response team. Here's where this happens, right? You want to have every step of that step, mapped out. Is there a forensic response needed, right? So what do we have to do to protect your evidence? Well, while containing. And this is, again, where you start your root cause analysis. And there's always a lot of debate about this, but this is according to the book for the exam. You want to start your root cause analysis in containment or response phase. Within mitigation and eradication, your root cause should be complete or mostly complete, right? But this is where we're getting rid of that, whatever it was. We're cleaning the virus off, we're clearing the malicious files off, whatever that may be. Mitigation or eradication is where we clean it up. Reporting really should be happening throughout, right? But it's formally defined here, right? So when you're working through an incident, you should be documenting everything, right? You spend almost as much time documenting. It's now going on close to 13 hours, so I apologize. You're going to spend as much time documenting what you did, when you did it, on what system, what the results were, what did you get out of it, as you do actually doing the steps of responding to an incident. But this is where it's formally defined at. So this could be, including your incident responders, any technical, non-technical people involved in the incident. And then recovery is restoration of your systems. We're going to get back up to operational status. We're no longer negatively impacted by the incident. Again, really, really need to continue your monitoring on and ramp it up on after an incident. We've seen it where it wasn't, and a couple months later came right back because they didn't continue their monitoring. Remediation is just basically recovery, but broader. Right? We're now going to go and say, okay, we identified the root cause on this system. Do we have to remediate any other? Do we that root cause, is that vulnerability anywhere else? Where are we looking at? What else didn't get affected but is still vulnerable? And then lessons learned. Yeah, always lessons. If you're not getting lessons learned out of an incident, you are missing out on a huge, huge opportunity. All right, there we go. Class 9 done. Yeah, I think this is more fun. This is educational, but also practical. This is where you're starting to see some of the things that are actually happening. Left off on 363 in the book. Wednesday, we'll start again with the operational, preventative, and detective controls. I believe that's Ryan. Have a great evening. Talk to you Wednesday. If you want to stick around, I will do some quiz questions here in just a minute. I'm going to stop my video, maybe, if I can find it, and get this set up for you. Hang on 1 second. All right. So we'll do some quiz questions here. This is CCCure, so we have a trial, so we can do some testing. We've been working with CCCure for, gosh, I guess this is the 4th year we've kind of worked together on this. Let's see. All right, so we'll do maybe a couple of here. It looks like it kind of quiet on the chat, but we'll do a couple. We got a little bit of time here. Kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at. So I'm just going to grab all of them. Always do pro level. That's what most like what is going to be on the actual exam. Minimize this, and you can see some of the different options here. So full disclosure, I have no idea what's coming up. Could get interesting. We'll see what happens. All right. Which of the following pairings uses technology to enforce access control policies within systems? So, well, we're using technology, okay, to enforce access control within systems. So we're enforcing it, we're preventing something from happening, and we're using technology. So I'm going to go with preventative technical. No pressure. These are always the worst. Hang on. See. All right. All right. Which of the following would most likely ensure a system development project meets business objectives? Strict deadlines and budgets. Well, no, that usually doesn't work, but okay. Development and tests are run by different individuals. User involvement in system specification and acceptance. That sounds pretty good, right? And then development of a project plan, identifying all development activities. So with this, what you'll notice is there's usually at least one, usually two questions you can eliminate pretty quickly if you're familiar with the material. And just give you a preview, this is basically exactly what we're going to do. The end of class on the 1st and then the entire class on the 3rd. So if you want to go through those with us, great. You'll hopefully learn some tips and tricks. All right. So for this, well, I'm going to eliminate strict deadlines and budgets, and development and tests are run by different individuals. That doesn't seem maybe the right thing. We'll see. User involvement in system specification and acceptance, or development of a project plan, identifying all development activities. You know what? If I want business objectives, it's between one of these two, I think. We'll find out. I'm going to go with development of a project. No, you know what? I'm going to user involvement, system specification, and acceptance. I want the users to tell me what they want and then provide acceptance and sign off that what I provided is correct. I'm actually sweating doing this in front of this many people. Which of the following statements pertaining to Kerberos is true? Public key developed by Microsoft, credential-based authentication system, X509. Microsoft uses Kerberos, but it was not developed by them. Oh man, I'm trying to think back. This is where all that memorization, and after you take the test, you just brain dump it out. I am going to go with, oh man, and probably everybody online is yelling at the right answer. X509? It's credential based. Darn it, I was close. I knew which one it was. I'll move that back. One of the nice things here, too, is you can see at the end what the explanation is for that. All right. What assesses potential loss that could be caused by a disaster? Well, business impact analysis is, that's it, right? I want to know what the impact is to the business, to critical or functions, processes, whatever it is, when that happens. Risk assessment, no, it's going to tell you what your risks are. Business assessment, I don't even know what that is. Business continuity plan is how you're going to recover or how you're going to operate during a disaster. So business impact analysis. All right. Which of the following NAT translation modes offers no protection from hacking attacks to an internal host using this functionality? All right, sorry to get a drink there. Which of the following NAT translation no protection? So, well, all right, dynamic means it's going to be changing as we go. Moderators are saying it's almost as good as live sports. I don't know about that. Dynamic translation, it's going to change every time, right? It's just as it comes in, it goes. Network redundancy translation, I'm not even sure what that is. Load balancing translation, no, that's not it. It's going to be static, right? So static translation is 1-to-1. All right, which of the following is an advantage of symmetric cryptography as compared with asymmetric key cryptography? Oh, all right. Well, what's an advantage of symmetric for asymmetric? Large number of keys are needed. That does not sound like an advantage. I can eliminate that right away. Provides limited key security services. Well, that doesn't sound like an advantage. Speed, well, that sounds like an advantage. Has no built-in key distribution. That does not sound like an advantage. Speed. There we go. All right. Controlling access to information systems and associated networks is necessary for the preservation of their integrity and availability. Well, yeah. Authenticity, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay. Authenticity, confidentiality, and availability. So what we're looking at, this is one of those ones where you're like, what's the most correct? Because really, I mean, integrity and availability is correct, but it's all three is the most correct answer. We want to control it to maintain confidentiality, integrity, and availability. All right. Question 8. Which of the following is not a known type of message authentication code? MAC. So remember we talked about mandatory access control and message authentication code. This is a great example of them spelling it out. These are, obviously not real exam questions, but these are very realistic. So you will have that. All right, signature-based MACs, SMAC, okay. Keyed hash message authentication, HMAC. I remember those. DES CBC, known as CBC MAC. So DES being chain block safer, and then universal hashing based MAC. I will be honest on this one. I don't remember. I will go with universal hashing based because I know signature and keyed, so it's going to be one of these two. This is where all that memorization, and remember, another important piece here, you're not going to be an expert on all these domains. I mean, that's just the reality. Oh, I just realized I didn't turn on my video. All right. You're not going to be, you just can't. Personally, for me, I studied encryption the most because I struggled with it. It's not, if you're not something you're doing day in, day out, it really is going to be difficult for you. So, be really strong in as many as you can, know where your weaknesses are, and study those. Try to eliminate as much as you can. I'm going to say universal hashing. It does. No? Oh, signature, see? I was wrong. I thought SMAC was a thing. You know what? You're not going to know it all. All right, so source code scanners, application scanners, and system scanners fall into a single category scanner called which of the following? Is it a vulnerability scanner, a port scanner, a network scanner, or a Nessus scanner? Well, I know it's not a Nessus scanner. That is a particular vendor's process, right? Nessus. A network scanner, well, okay, but that's not going to scan code. A port scanner, well, again, that's not, so we're going to say vulnerability scanner. Which of the ISO IEC standards described provides requirements for an information security management system? So again, we're going to go through and try and eliminate first. If you know the answer right off the bat, that's even better. But so I know it's not 27017, right? We talked about 27001 and 27002. So I'm going to eliminate 17 and 34. One is the requirements for your ISMS. 2002 is the actual process around it. So there you go. Submit for grading. Overall, pretty good. We can review only our incorrect answers. And it should, oops, that's not it. Details, there it is. So what's nice here is it now shows you kind of the description of what it is and what was wrong and what the reference was. So if you get wrong answers, you do have the ability to study them real time. There you go. What's nice is you got some really good resources in some of these. Now, these are a lot of these are user defined, so the amount of detail will be different in each, but there you go. And with that, I am going to call it an evening. I'll give you a little bit of a preview of what's coming towards the end here in class, the last two classes. So hopefully that will be helpful to everyone. I think we'll have to sign off here with a final dad joke. Question, can a kangaroo jump higher than a house? Of course, houses can't jump. With that, have a great evening. We'll see you guys on Wednesday.